technology is deflationary. Before this, I started a tutoring business. I was like a math tutor. I ended up abandoning it because all you're doing is kind of getting in the middle of this transaction where you have a person, a human tutor, teaching the child. And the fundamental problem is there just aren't enough great human tutors to go around. And I didn't really see a way to fix that. The technology was just kind of like a band-aid on top of it, unless you could have something that was a technology that would be more effective than a human tutor, or as effective as a human tutor. Then every kid could get a one-on-one tutor, and one-on-one is just far and away the best way to learn. Particularly what we have with the tutor, it's limitlessly scalable. It works for every kid everywhere on earth. My son, who's 10 now, synthesis is going to be an advantage for him. For my unborn son, it's just going to be something that you have to do to keep up, right? Because just everybody's going to have it. It will be something eventually that people kind of take for granted. That's great because it will level up the civilization. What portion of people now do really understand math well enough to use it to solve practical problems? It's probably way less than 5%, and it could totally be 100%. We don't have enough teachers to go around. It just has unforeseeable impacts on the civilization. The non-technological education system is basically built to decide who to give the spots to. There's a kind of famous example with the Chinese government bureaucracy, where they have all these tests you have to study for years and years and years, and it's just because you need to do this to get to a university level. It's because they just don't have enough spots, right? But if you have computers, just talking to one of our investors whose kid calls the synthesis tutor the robot teacher. If you have robot teachers, then you don't have to worry about who gets the training. So there's so much in our society that comes out of this, we just have limited spots at the Ivy League and we're going to crown the elite there, that just falls away when you have technological education. I think that's going to be a major transition for society, because we just haven't had anything like that before. So if you think about a good tutor or a good teacher, they're just constantly asking you questions and just seeing how you respond, because they're then going to adapt. So whereas what we're doing is we're trying to really make sure that you get the concepts. And so whenever we ask a question, whatever your answer comes back, we are diverting, to a new path based on what that answer is. And it's really not obvious that it's happening. If you watch your kids go through it can feel like it's scripted. That's the way I felt when I got the first kind of demo of this. And then I watched two kids go through it, and I was like, oh, because they took totally different paths. They each of them got confused about things that the other one didn't get confused about. And so we just skip over that material, and then we dive deeper on, whatever you need help understanding. There's another piece of it, which is mastery learning, which is, we want you to have all the building blocks. That's what makes learning just feel easy when it builds on top of itself. If you have all the basic foundation, then math is really easy, because every single new thing is just one tiny little step, right? And it feels like nothing. When you have the foundations, those steps feel like nothing. You don't even feel like you're learning. So there's, to some extent, there are things we have to cover, because we just have to make sure, every kid will take a wildly different path through the lesson.
Welcome back to the Present Fathers Podcast. We are very excited to share this episode with you. We're going to talk about revolutionizing education, and we have maybe the best man in the country to talk about exactly that. Chrisman, welcome to the Present Fathers Podcast. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. And you're expecting, right? So we got another one on the way. Congratulations.
Yeah, number 4. We decided to restart the clock after getting done with diapers and strollers and carriers and all that. We have 3 kids, and the youngest is 5, and we just thought, you get to that it's going to be freedom and calm again, and then you're that kind of sucks. Let's just restart the adventure and have another one. So yeah, this will be boy number 3, Christmas Day. He's expected.
Oh, nice.
So yeah. Yeah.
Congratulations. You escaped the baby jail, and you're jumping right back into it. So
yeah,
you definitely got some determination. Kudos to you, my friend.
Short memory.
Short memory. That's right. All righty. Well, I'm actually going to turn it over to Dustin to kick off our conversation here. But before we do that real fast, Chrisman, can you just briefly kind of tell everyone who you are, and especially with synthesis schools, what you're doing at a kind of a high level, and then let's go into that conversation.
Yeah, sure. So I'm co-founder and CEO of a company called Synthesis Education Company. We started about 4 years ago during COVID. I co-founded it with a guy called Josh Don, who is a teacher. He was tapped by Elon to start a school at SpaceX for Elon's kids and some of the other SpaceX families. I visited the school. And I thought what they were doing was really remarkable. And really just they took a first principles approach to like, what if we rethink education? What are those principles? And, Elon came up with, he wanted kids who could solve problems. And that's so different than what we do in the education system now. You could call it solving problems that kids do in school, but it's really solving the kind of problems that will just get you to do more school. And Elon obviously wanted people who could solve problems for, SpaceX and Tesla and just, build the civilization. And so I visited that school. I thought it was really, really awesome. And during COVID, we decided to start this business to try and scale some of the best aspects of that school. So we've got two products now. One which is like this team problem solving game / simulation that we call Synthesis Teams, which is really fun. Gives kids the kind of chance to solve complex problems working in teams. Kind of like everything that we do to build the civilization. And then the other one is a superhuman tutor, which we worked with some researchers from DARPA, part of the Pentagon, that they built this superhuman tutor for the military, and we ended up building a version of that for kids, and that's sort of been taking off as well. So yeah, that's the last couple of years.
So, Chrisman, as far as the problem solving goes, we've all read Ender's Game. We know the whole concept of children that are fighting aliens. They don't realize it. Are you building a battle school? Are the children in Synthesis fighting aliens right now? Is that happening?
Yeah, that's really something that we're not at liberty to speak about. But yeah, that used to be the original kind of elevator pitch I had. It's like Ender's Game for innovators. For something like that. A lot of people really didn't like that, because of the genocide and the child abuse, I guess, in that book. So I started saying Ender's Game, but without the child abuse and genocide, and that didn't hit as well. And so I've had to come up with different ways to talk about it.
Probably,
but yeah, I mean that's you guys like with the coming at things from like the fatherhood angle. It's like I always just think like school. It's really designed for girls. Like boys get really excited about things like competition, right? And then competition's like verboten in school. Like when I was a kid, you could play dodgeball in school. Now I don't think they even allow that anymore. And so there's this like outlet for, we have girls as well. Like some girls are competitive and really, really like to mix it up as well. So our gender balance it's not so totally skewed like a lot of online games. It is more skewed toward boys because it's an outlet for that kind of competition and kind of problem solving that's grounded in a reality, kind of like a video game.
And so that was going to dovetail into my next question. It seems like the type of schooling and teaching that you're doing would be geared more towards boys. So how does that work with the gender balance? Do you aim for like a certain 50-50 balance? Do you not care? You just kind of take all comers? How does that work?
We take all comers, right? Because the Synthesis like Teams product, that was based on a class at the SpaceX school that was just called Synthesis, and so the school there was gender balance, and it's really interesting. The two best players in the school, one was a boy, one was a girl, and the girl's just like a stone cold killer, and it just people would rally around her. She'd be the leader, and she's just a killer, and so we made the decision we weren't going to make any judgments one way or another, but it tends to. The balance I think comes out now. It's like 60-40, something like that. So it's not crazy. But it's we don't apologize for it, being like a good place for boys. And so one of the things we do to make it more welcoming for girls is you just try and mix it up. So the girls aren't kind of on their own on a team with a bunch of like boisterous boys. So you just try and, we're a business. We're trying to make it work for everybody. And so these natural like gender differences kind of come up, and we just do what we can to deal with them and not make assumptions about people. So yeah, that's kind of how we handle it. It seems to be going well so far. It's seems to be a pretty broad appeal.
Hey, it's George from the Present Fathers podcast. I'd like to talk to you about Synthesis School. After recording this episode, I immediately purchased it for my daughter. I got the Synthesis Tutor. We don't need the team structure, just the one-on-one, and I am blown away with it. The first time she used it, she was on it for hours, was having a great time, and prior to having Synthesis Tutor, math homework has been one of the worst elements about school for us. My daughter was not enjoying it. We were wasting a lot of time trying to get through math worksheets and to understand concepts, lots of tears being shed, lots of frustrations. That is a thing of the past with Synthesis. For a very low monthly fee, you can get access to the Synthesis Tutor. My daughter has tons of fun with it. The first day she got it, she played it for hours. I couldn't believe it. I was almost in tears because it was finally a relief that we didn't have to struggle with math. For years, we've been having those issues. So it is absolutely something you need to look into. Those of us from the podcast who have kids who are the right age range to actually start using it are all using it. So it is our endorsement to say you need to try Synthesis Tutor at a minimum. And if you have multiple kids or maybe want to get them plugged in a different way, check out the Synthesis Team option. But overall, this product is unbelievable. It works so well. You're going to hear lots about it in this episode, but we had to make our official endorsement to say, go give it a try, parents. This is an incredible tool to give your kids and also buy back some of your time. So check it out.
Yeah, and the results you're getting are almost unbelievable. So you told a story specifically about your 12-year-old students beating Berkeley engineering students. How did that work? Was that a program that the 12-year-olds had already seen, or were these new problems that were totally new? Like, how did this go down?
Yeah, it was new problems. I mean, one of the insights from starting this was, this idea that you just figuring out a video game is kind of like being a scientist. And so there's actually maybe not a whole lot of value into playing chess for like thousands and thousands of hours because you sort of learn more and more about chess by doing that. But when you play a variety of games, you sort of extract kind of the meta game, right? So there is one there. So there's a skill to being good at games, and life is sort of games, right? I think that's why we like video games, is because they're similar, like they're like compressed life, right? And so our idea is that, you give the kids this variety of games that all have these different parameters, and we don't want to be the place where you go really deep on one game and you kind of wake up 10 years later and you're like, what did I do with all that time? We want you to be always, there's this concept called the zone of proximal development, which just means like you're right at the edge of your capabilities. So you're being challenged, you're going to be locked in, but it's not automatic yet. And so we want to keep you there. So we're switching the games up pretty often. And so with the Berkeley thing, that was some years ago. Yeah, it was new game for everybody. So our kids haven't seen it, Berkeley kids haven't seen it. But our kids have had the kind of experience of being thrown into these chaotic situations over and over with a group and having to do sense making as a group and align on strategy and work together and not devolve into infighting. And so, I think that's the reason that they're able to be more successful than the graduate students at Berkeley.
Yeah, adaptability is so important, especially in the world we're moving into, right? The dawn of AI and everything. Like, being adaptable is going to be maybe the most important thing moving forward. So that's awesome that that's like a core tenet of how it's working, because I can already see the massive value from that. Quick question on just, I assume there's probably a lot of critics on like, oh, well, this is a for-profit school, so it can't be very pure, right? Because they're just trying to make money. And in my view, actually, because you're incented to actually have to produce results, it's probably going to be way better than anything the government's going to attempt to run. So I would love for you to kind of walk through that whole angle a little bit, because I'm sure a lot of people, just the notion of having, a for-profit school system is so, fundamentally different than what they're conditioned towards. I'm not sure if you've ran into that very much, but I would love to kind of walk through that a little bit for any doubters.
Yeah, I don't know that we've run into it that much, because I think the people who believe that way tend to be leftists, and like we're not leftists. Leftists tend to not have families, so I can be okay, sort of like offending the people on the far left of the political spectrum, because they tend to not have kids anyway, so they're not really customers. That's like part of it. I also I felt very strongly from the beginning that we had to be a for-profit company, someone that served families, because if we weren't, if the families aren't paying for it, then it's not good enough for them to pay for. And families pay for all kinds of things that they value, and if we're having somebody else pay for it, I just didn't my experience of the world is, having somebody else pay for it, you tend to serve whoever that master is. And so it was very important to Josh and I that we did something that went direct to families, that we started the company that way. I think now we're getting schools and even like national governments interested in buying, what we're doing, paying for it for the students. And we're not opposed to that, but we just think we need to stay close to families because the very best products in the world and the best services are for-profit services and products, right? So if we can meet the bar where, we have billionaires paying for this for their kids, then it's good enough and it's okay for the government to buy it versus how many services that sell to schools or the government provided services. It's something that's like not good enough. People wouldn't pay for it with their own money. And so that was part of the thinking there. There's another one, which is just, I think, to attract the best talent. That people are here for the mission, but also it helps if you can get rich along the way. And so to attract the best talent in order to make the best thing, like I just thought it had to be a for-profit entity, and so that's where we landed.
I like that, man. It's really good points, and appreciate you being transparent with that.
Yeah, very cool. So speaking of very rich and influential people, Balaji Srinivasan was nice enough to chat with me. I said, hey, I'm going to interview Chrisman. I know you invested in him. What should I ask him? And the one thing he asked was to say, what is this going to do to give great education to the masses? So that was kind of his idea, was how are you going to scale it? How are you going to make sure that education that was only available to multimillionaires, right, aristocrats, the Alexander the Greats of the world, how does that transition to everyone being able to use these tools?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the pretty simple answer to that, which is like technology is deflationary. So before this, I started a tutoring business. I was like a math tutor in the Bay Area, tutoring some of the children of the Bay Area's elite. I ended up starting a company around that, and I ended up abandoning it because it's all you're doing is kind of getting in the middle of this transaction where you have a person, a human tutor, teaching the child. And the fundamental problem is there just aren't enough great human tutors to go around. And I didn't really see a way to fix that. Like the technology was just kind of like a Band-Aid on top of it, unless you could have something that was a technology that would be more effective than a human tutor or as effective as a human tutor. Then every kid could get a one-on-one tutor, and one-on-one is just far and away the best way to learn. Like just tons of research beyond this. Probably anybody who's learned something, kind of knows this by now. That if you get like a one-on-one expert, that's the best way. And so, particularly what we have with the tutor, it's limitlessly scalable. It costs a lot to build, but once it's built, once you figure out, the best way to teach kids, fractions and geometry, and it's really working, then it works, for every kid everywhere on earth. And, that's the cost will go down, right? Like you just think if you get a billion people on it and all of them are paying $1, then, you just don't need to charge that much. So it gets to be something that's, the cost just goes lower and lower over time and just gets more exposed to more people. So our we're pretty upfront about that. Like our prices should go down over the time. Right now you have kind of like the people who are like the customers for like the Tesla Roadster, where this is something that's really valuable and important to them, and they're able and willing to pay a premium. But over time, as we get more efficient at what we're doing, cost should go down and it's available to more and more people. And so one of the things I like to think about is my son who's 10 now, synthesis is going to be an advantage for him. But for my unborn son, it's just going to be something that you like have to do to keep up, right? Because just everybody's going to have it, and so it will be something eventually that people kind of take for granted, and that's great because it will level up the civilization. We have what portion of people now do like really understand math, well enough to use it to solve practical problems. It's probably like way less than 5%, and it could totally be 100%. We don't have enough teachers to go around to teach it in a way where we can get everyone to that line. So I think that will getting it out to everybody, makes those kids more capable, but also just has unforeseeable impacts on the civilization, right? Like a more educated civilization is hard, you can't predict exactly what's going to happen then, but we bet that it will be good.
Yeah, what if we had thousands of geniuses, right? There's probably kids all over the world who don't have access to the educational opportunities, and this could potentially give it to them. So I remember I taught for Kaplan for a few years, and
Mhm.
the students would drop $3,000, and their SAT scores would go up by 300 points, and they'd get into Harvard instead of a community college. And I was like, wow. Literally, it's because their parents had money they were able to do this. So it's a really kind of unfair thing, but fair or not, it's so cool to hear that we're able to break that mold and have us moving towards something that is more fair. So I think Brandon,
Totally,
you had a
yeah.
question. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's like it's really interesting. It's something I think about a lot. Like our education system, the non-technological education system, is basically built to decide who to give the spots to. So there's a kind of famous example with the Chinese um, government bureaucracy, where they have all these tests you have to study for years and years and years, and it's just because you need to do this to get to like a university level. It's because they just don't have enough spots, right? But if you have computers, it's just talking to one of our investors whose kid calls the synthesis tutor the robot teacher. If you have robot teachers, then you don't have to worry about who gets the training. So there's so much in our society that comes out of this, like we just have limited spots at the Ivy League and we're going to crown like the elite there, that just falls away when you have technological education. I think that's going to be a major transition for society, because we just haven't had anything like that before, and it'll be interesting.
Yeah, and with yours is kind of like a progressive education model, right? We're discussing that, and we're having the hopes that there's a bigger impact, just not only here, but obviously on a global level, right? Especially in countries
Yeah.
where education is not readily available. But one of
Yeah.
the other questions that I have for you specifically is my son is on the spectrum. He has a pretty severe amount of ADHD, so he's neurodivergent. But you can ask him the code to something he saw 2 years ago, and he can rattle it off, right? So how does synthesis kind of help cater to a neurodivergent child, especially in comparison to where public schools are just slapping kids in a one size fits all type approach, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not an expert on that. All I know is like from the beginning, we didn't do anything special to consider the needs of neurodivergent kids, but we are always getting these kind of like great stories from customers saying this changed their kid's life, um, on both the teams and the tutor side. So I don't exactly know what it is. On the tutor, I can probably speculate a little better that a lot of, one of the DARPA program managers that we worked with, who'd kind of solve this problem for the military, he talked a lot about how the social relationship just gets in the way of learning. So when they started, everyone was like, there's just something about a person though sitting with you, and they kind of disproved that. And he was led to believe, there's something negative about a person because there's a whole lot that comes in when you have like a social relationship that mediates the learning. And so when you just take that away, it's easier to learn the material. So I'm a big believer that we're basically going to have software that, there are a lot of things that they're just ideas and patterns, and they're abstract and they're easily communicated, perhaps better communicated through computers. But then there's the relationship side of thing. Like we're not going to replace like fathers, right? So you hopefully get, like, the way I look at it with my family is like, my kids need to learn fractions and ratios and ideally physics and those sort of things. I like to talk to them about that, but I don't necessarily want to sit down with them and be super patient while they understand it. Like I want to go on like mountain bike rides and go surfing and be a father. And so there's this, we combined all these things, like their relationship and the learning, because we kind of there had to be a person in the way. But it seems like it doesn't need to be that way. And we can specialize, right? The computer can do what it does best, and the people can do what they do best.
That's so interesting. You talk about how you remove the social aspect, and just thinking about that, like my son loves everything that is gamified. So I feel like a lot of the stuff would be kind of a gamified thing, but at the same time, removing that social aspect, a robot is not going to emotionally react to them when they mess up, right? Whereas a tutor or a person, a human being will. So Yeah, you're removing a lot of barriers there. That's oh man, that's so cool. That's a great
You don't
idea.
have to worry about the judgment. The worrying about the judgment is
Right.
such a huge blocker for learning, and it gets
Yeah.
even. There's a guy who wrote a whole book about this called "How Children Fail." John Holt, I think, is his name,
Mm.
and it's a brilliant book. It's a guy who's a teacher, and he just kind of catalogs all the ways that kids would be really good at fooling you in that they've learned that whatever concept you're teaching, right? Like you go like, do you get it? And you really want them to get it, because you've been teaching it. You're like hoping that you did a good
But they
job,
don't
and
want
the
to
kids
like
go,
displease you or
oh,
something.
yeah, and they
Yeah.
get really good at going like, oh wait, oh no, I see now, and they just have no idea, but they just get really
Yeah.
good at like fooling you to like make you smile and like feel like they did a good job, right? So there's this, it's kind of like a whole field of study around this, and yeah, the folks that we worked with from DARPA were like, it turns out the person we think is an obstacle, and that's in a one-on-one situation. It gets immediately worse when you're teaching two people, right? Because now
Mm.
the social interaction between the two of them, what if this one gets it faster? What if this one gets it slower? Now that starts crowding out everything. And in a classroom, 10 or 15 kids that are at different levels, you can only imagine. It's just like a social nightmare to, put your
Yeah.
hand up and ask a question and show that you didn't get it. That's like, you just can't learn in that environment. So anyway, my thesis on this is basically like anything that can be transmitted, any kind of learning that can be transmitted by the computer, like that is going to happen because it's so much more effective. And but there's other stuff, there's human relationships that we can then focus on in the schools and at home.
Yeah, that's a really interesting like thing to consider, and as you're saying it, and I'm kind of just thinking about it further, it seems really obvious now that you say it, and yeah, it's. I wonder how many kids are actually limited significantly, or they learn the wrong, like to your point of wanting to kind of fake it. We're almost creating a generation of liars in a way,
Yeah.
unnecessarily. My quick question, just to follow up on the tutor aspect with the AI tutor, is it like adaptive? Is it like adapting to the child, or is it kind of rigid so that the child has to kind of like grow to a certain point, or just how does that kind of work out without giving away all your secrets?
Yeah. It's there was this previous generation of like the adaptive software, which really meant you had kind of like if you imagine like a whole lot of worksheets, put into a database, and the adaptive part was like it would give you the next problem that was at your level, so another practice problem. And we're not that. It's like micro adaptive is a term I've been using. It's asking you questions constantly. So if you think about like a good tutor or a good teacher, they're just constantly asking you questions and just seeing how you respond, because they're then going to adapt. So these adaptive programs, they like give you a quiz or a test, and then they go like, okay, here's some more practice on these things. Whereas what we're doing is we're trying to really make sure that you get the concepts. And so whenever we ask a question, whatever your answer comes back, we are diverting, to a new path based on what that answer is. And it's really not obvious that it's happening. Like if you watch your kids go through it, it can feel like it's scripted. That's the way I felt when I got like the first kind of demo of this. And then I watched two kids go through it, and I was like, oh, because they took totally different paths. They each of them got confused about things that the other one didn't get confused about. And so we just skip over that material, and then we dive deeper on, whatever you need help understanding. So in that sense, it's really adaptive. It's like this micro adaptive thing. There's another piece of it, which is mastery learning, which is, we need to make sure we want you to have like all the building blocks. That's what makes learning just feel easy when it builds on top of itself. If you have all the basic foundation, then math is really easy because every single new thing is just like one tiny little step, right? And it feels like nothing when you have the foundations. Those steps feel like nothing. You don't even feel like you're learning. So there's, to some extent, there are things like we have to cover because we just have to like make sure that you know it. But yeah, in the main part of it, it's designed to be, every kid will take a wildly different path through the lessons, and it's designed that way to kind of shore up the misconceptions.
Yeah, that's super cool, man. Thanks for walking us through that. And now I'm excited. I want to get it.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, as I was reading about Bloom and mastery level learning, there's literally nobody who says that it's not the best way to learn. It's just that you can't scale it because there's not enough good teachers to do it. So I
Yeah, yeah.
teach at the postgraduate educational level. I'm a professor of anesthesia, and I have 30 kids in my class. I talk to them, I teach them. I can tell they're kind of zoning out. I have to do these long 3-hour lectures on how anesthesia machines work. They're not absorbing most of it, right? I'm trying to make jokes and keep it interesting, but they're not there. Well,
That's
then we
riveting, Dustin.
transition
I
into
can't
the
wait to attend your next lecture.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I literally have to apologize to them and say, if you're falling asleep, tell me. We'll take a 5-minute stretch break because, a group of 30 in a classroom setting, whether you're an adult or a 12-year-old, is not that interesting. But we then transition into the operating room, and I get to make sure that my students have 90% mastery. If they don't know exactly what they're doing, if they're not really, really good, they don't move on to the next step. So if they can't intubate well, they don't move on to the next step. If they can't place an arterial line, they don't move on to the next step. And they get so good at it. It's amazing. And they also get one-on-one hands-on education 10 hours a day with anesthesiologists and what we are, which is a mid-level. And they learn so fast. I mean, they pick up these skills, in 2 months that they may never pick up in a virtual or a group setting. So mastery level learning, I'm such a believer in. It's so exciting, and it's awesome that you guys are doing that.
Yeah, and they probably feel more, you probably don't have to do like a lot of the mode, like making jokes and stuff. Like you probably don't have to do that when they're seeing themselves build the skill at something that they care about, right? Which is another interesting thing. No matter how like, oh, okay, I'm picking up the lecture, you don't really know and you don't feel like you're building a skill. So like, yeah, the hands-on thing, or I wonder, I was thinking about things like that. There's a physical component. I think you probably need you have to do the physical component, right? Like you won't get to a world-class level without doing that. But I always wonder how far you can take it with simulations, like how much of the work could be kind of pre-done for you so that maybe you only have to do 10% as much, expensive time in the operating room. I don't know, just something I've been curious about. Maybe we'll get there at some point. We'll build the anesthesiology robot tutor.
I would be over the moon if we got to do that. That would be so cool. I would love that. And we have
Okay,
a
so
Mediman. Oh, go ahead.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think you'll like this too. One of the things they discovered at DARPA that I always thought was really cool was so they were teaching IT for the U.S. Navy, and the DARPA assignment was build something that gets people to give new recruits and gets them to 10 years on the job experience equivalent, right? And they just crushed this. They knocked it out of the park. They were 4 standard deviations above the group with 10 years experience. So it was just completely off the charts kind of stuff. And one of the things they said to me is how they did it is they got a bunch of experts and they just collected all the stories and mistakes they'd made, and then they built it into the simulations. And so what happens is, 10 years of experience is actually just 40 things, right? And they're like, we just put you through all the 40 things and you get more than 10 years experience right there. So it's something to think about is, I don't know if you see this in your work, but it's like doing anesthesia, any kind of like difficult profession. It's just a scenario, like all these kind of stories and scenarios that you've been through, and you can build these into the simulations and students can go through it. And, most of our day-to-day work is not all that novel, it's kind of like repetitive, but if you get those like, those kind of like highly salient situations, you put kids through them and you just get these remarkable results.
Yeah, you nailed it. You fail faster, right? So my students who do the best are the ones that fail faster and then they start to succeed, right? Because we all fail. That's part of being a baby.
Yeah.
They fall over until they start walking, right? And
Yeah.
we do that in anesthesia. We fall over until we start walking. That's how you learn.
Yeah.
So
I have a quick little and I'm a knuckle dragging, grunt over here, so you'll have to dumb it down to the common tongue, but we have the luxury of like experienced people that we can pull in that example you gave, right? To create these models and accelerate it for like future generations. But then at some point, no one's going to have the experience, right? Because we'll have surpassed where we can be. So I guess what happens then, right? Like it's amazing now for maybe the next generation, but do we ever get to a point where then we actually can't do that anymore? I'm just, you've clearly thought these things through much more than I have. So I'm just genuinely curious.
Yeah. No, that's a really great question. It's something I've thought about quite a bit. So, I mean, basically, you have, we can transmit the knowledge that we have of, say, like mathematics or physics. So you can get really good at transmitting that and kind of compressing the time that it takes to learn that. But then how do we create new math and new physics or new surgical techniques? That sort of is that sort of like the question, the spirit of the question. Yeah. Oh, uh-oh. Did
Yeah, yeah,
I?
it is. It's
Oh,
like,
okay. Sorry. I thought I lost
so
that.
in that example of, I guess it was the Navy, right, where these inexperienced people just pulled the experts, and then they were able to have a
Yeah.
better,
Yeah.
right. But I guess my point is, like, fast forward 50 years, if we've all just been kind of relying on, oh well, we pulled all the experts and now we've done all these things, but now there's no real new experts, I guess, in a way. That's kind of where I'm going
Yeah.
with this. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
does it just
Yeah.
not matter
How
because
to?
AI will be smart enough, or I mean, I don't know.
I don't think so. I mean, this is a huge bet that like AI won't be smart enough. AI can't do. AI can kind of, relate things to what's in its training set, but AI doesn't have explanations, right? And so people, the reason like you see the self-driving cars where, just something funny happens, like there's a traffic cone that's like fallen over in the road and it just can't figure out what to do. It's because its knowledge of how to, go around traffic cones is just statistical. Whereas for a human, it's not, right? A traffic cone, there's an explanation behind a traffic cone or an
Yeah, we can
obstacle in
make
the road.
judgments.
And so it allows you to creatively come up with what to do. And I think that's going to continue to be true. I don't see anything in AI that's going to supplant human creativity. And so I think, the way you move forward is you transmit the best knowledge, what you have, just kind of like anything. I imagine this is how it works in the military. You have to study the past. So you can you understand, the best knowledge of the past, but then situations change, technology evolves, like battlefield evolves. But if you understand the past, you can be more capable at coming up with creative explanations and ways to solve future problems. So there's nothing, I think just like transmitting the best of what we've done in the past is sort of the best thing we can do to build the future. Where what's really sad is when you have ideas that don't work and have repeatedly not worked in history, and then you go and repeat them because you're not aware of the past of your field or politically or whatever it is. So at least we should communicate what's been done before and kind of the mistakes that have been made, and then my belief is we can do that very quickly. Like I think school just wastes so much time. Like when you start to see kids learning, I watched my 5-year-old use our tutor for the first time a couple days ago, and I was just like, we're gonna run out of math by the time she's 8. Like she's learning so much faster than you would learn in school. Like she's just gonna be done, and she's gonna be better than me and her mom. Probably by age 8 or 10 or so,
All right,
right?
where do I sign my kid up?
Yeah, that's going to be a good thing, right? These kids will be, ready for the world sooner. I just think we'll have a shorter period of your life where you're in school and kind of like consuming the knowledge of the past, and then you get out in the world and figure it out. You have to figure out your own specific path, and I think that's much more interesting than sitting in a classroom. So that's my real ulterior motive is I just hated being in a classroom, and I still hate listening to like long lectures or anything like that. Like no offense, Dustin, but I just want to shorten that time so kids
Yeah.
can get out and start their lives and do interesting and creative things.
I think that's a hatred we can all unify on. I think Brandon had something serious
Well,
for us.
listen, we're going to be those old guys that are grandpas telling kids, well, we added everything with an Atticus or a Casio. And they're like, what is that, right? They got all this. I wish I had this stuff when I was that age. It's incredible, the possibilities. But I guess one of my questions is, the Peterson Academy is about to release, and Dr. Jordan has extensively talked about credentializing, everything that his academy achieves for anybody that signs up, on the level of actual university colleges. Like he's going for the throat. They canceled
Nice.
him, and
Yeah.
he's returning the favor, right? And so,
Yeah.
my question to you is, how are you guys credentializing this? Like, say for somebody that may want to augment this amazing program for like homeschooling or replace
Yeah.
schooling altogether. Like, how are you guys credentializing that?
Well, so in the area that we operate in, which is for kids, starting at we actually say like age 7 or 8 is the minimum, but we have some 5-year-olds really precocious. You can put them on the tutor, and going up through about age 13 or so. The credentialing is already there in the form of their standardized tests, and some of those tests are pretty good. There's the one they use for the international rankings called the PISA test. I think is actually like
Hmm.
a good test. It's one where if you took the SAT and gave it to a bunch of SpaceX engineers, like I think you'd get mixed results because a lot of that stuff is not, practical. It doesn't have anything to do with understanding math.
Yeah.
They're just kind of like, do you know this term? But the PISA test is a good one. Like I think anyone who's an adult who's like capable at math will do well on the fourth grade PISA. So a lot of that stuff is kind of already handled for us. And I don't know where we go, eventually if we do like get a high school credential or something like that. It seems to me like that there are tests that are already out there, and what's missing is the ability to, confer the knowledge needed to pass those
Sure.
tests. And so that's the part we're focused on right now. Dreaming, going forward a little bit, my dream is that we end up coming up with a new test. If nobody else does it, we'll do this. But I'd love to get a test that's sort of like a math and physics, engineering, science kind of test, and
Finance,
that
finance, please.
yeah, maybe maybe not even bundle it all together. Maybe do it like per subject. But if you think about like
Yeah.
if you're SpaceX and you're hiring people to colonize Mars, I'd love to have a test where if your 15-year-old passes it, that SpaceX is like, hey, we want to talk to you about an internship, and I think that's totally possible, right? You make like a really hard test and you give it to everybody, and you just take like the top people. So I
Yeah.
could see us
And
getting
to
to
your
something
point,
like that
that's
if we
like
get too frustrated
open
with the testing.
access, right? There's
Yeah,
no limit there because you don't need all these fancy degrees from Harvard or whatever, right? Like just
yeah,
whoever's good enough.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So I don't think you want to, I don't exactly know what the Peterson Academy is doing, but I do see a lot of people in higher education. I just kind of think higher education is, it's sort of interesting. It just feels kind of like a relic, and that it was a ticket to like the upper class, and then it became like kind of a ticket to the middle class, and now, it doesn't seem to do much, for a lot of people who go, and so maybe that credential becomes less important actually. But I do think like a training credential, like something with where it's like engineering, like a hard subject or something like that, where it's very difficult to fake, and it's like a job skill. I think that kind of, I suspect sort of like that kind of credentialing will rise, and the sort of general university degree, like you can talk about the humanities intelligently. I just don't think that's going to be that important. I think if people want to do that, they can watch YouTube videos. But like, I don't think there's not like a great market for that right now. It like there is for like more technical skills. So anyway, I could be totally wrong about that, and I'm not an expert, but that's like kind of my armchair quarterback
I don't know.
looking
The
at it.
Australian breakdancer in gender studies kind of proved your point pretty well for me. So
Yeah, yeah, it's like that whole system is just hemorrhaging trust, and I don't
Yeah.
think it'll be replaced. There's a line from Thomas Sowell. He's like, well, what would you he's like, we should abolish the Fed, and people are like, what would you replace it with? And he's like, well, what do you replace cancer with when you get it surgically removed? And so I think that's partly the expansion of the university system, is maybe a case that's like that.
I
I
mean, I
love
was
that.
saying it like a decade ago. I was like, you don't need college. Like, you need it because you have to have the degree. But like even 10 years ago, you could literally find out almost everything you need on YouTube. Like anytime I
Yeah,
need to do something, like especially if it's like a even technical handyman type stuff and I don't really know
yeah,
how to do it, I go to YouTube, I type in the exact thing I need and there's 20 videos on it and they're all
yeah,
really good. I mean, it's
yeah,
totally decentralized already without AI, and I think it's just going to accelerate, which is great
yeah,
because even, older guys like us, we can figure it out.
Well, and the
yeah,
giveaway to
yeah,
me is people don't ask me, what'd you learn in school? What was your major? They ask me, what school did you go to? And I say, oh, I went to Carolina. And it's like this, this big thing, but that shouldn't matter, right? I mean, that's literally, it's like a caste system where you go, oh, I went to Yale, I went to
yeah.
Harvard,
That's
and these kinds
that's
of things.
exactly what it is. And it's just so you don't have like other signals for like an 18-year-old, and it's very like anti-American, when you when you think about it. There should be like a little more kind of diversity in how people um, establish themselves, and the fact that it's all kind of like, yeah, this caste system is very strange. I hope that it won't continue, but I've been thinking that it'll have to break every day for 20 years, and so far it's still going somewhat, so we'll see.
Yeah. So speaking of competition, you have some competitors. You have Khan Academy. You have some other quote unquote AI tutors. They've said that they're based on large language models. Does Synthesis use an LLM, or like what? Pitch me on why Synthesis is better than some competitors that are saying they're basing their teaching on, say, ChatGPT.
I don't actually know any competitors by name that are doing it with GPT. I hear from, school leaders or other, founders of other like tech companies that are doing things in the education space that use our tutor, and they just say like these things are garbage. I can speculate as to why. Um, the LLM, the idea of like a hallucination is not like it's not a bug that they can be fixed. It's a feature. It's just like how they work, and I think that's intolerable when you're trying to learn something new. If our tutor, if it just could go off and say, something random that didn't pertain at all to the truth, then it's kind of like a person in that way where people just lose trust for it. And so I've seen some not to rag on Khan Academy, but I've seen them doing experiments in schools where they're trying to explain to the teachers, you have to explain to the students that this thing doesn't always get it right. And it's like I just think that's going to be a very tough thing to do. Like I think you know that's just a weird idea that like you read a book to consume this knowledge, and also the stuff in the book may be true. It may be totally
Right.
wildly off. I would just be like, then I'm not reading it because it's nonsense, right? And
Yeah. Then how
so
are you
yeah,
supposed to know what is wrong?
yeah, and like as a new learner, you can't do that, right? Like you're trying to learn a subject, you cannot, by definition, differentiate between what is true and what is false. And so it just seems like a very much like a hammer looking for a nail. Like I think people just kind of throw around the words AI, and for a certain part of the population, it just shuts down all their critical thinking, and they go, well, this is going to be able to do anything because we called it AI. But really, I think if you have to call it machine learning or language models or image model. If you have to refer to it more specifically and use words that better correspond to reality, then I think it gives you a much better idea of the capabilities of these things. And I think some of the hype is starting to go out of that of that bubble already. All that said, like we use them. I mean, they're a good tool if you use them correctly. But they're not. We're not saying to an LLM like teach this kid how to do fractions, how to solve fractions yet. Like we're just nowhere close to that. We don't let any LLM output get to students. The primary thing we use them for is this is still in beta, but the kids can talk to the tutor, and we're able to ask them open-ended questions like how much you know about fractions, something like that, and they can answer. And then we can, no matter what they say, we can kind of map it to some answers that we were expecting, whether they use the exact words or not. And it's pretty cool for that. I get the feeling of just being able to talk to it and have it seem like it understands you is pretty neat. But we're not having the LLM generate what is said to the students because we just it's not worth it. It would be more
Yeah.
expensive as well. It's yeah.
Right.
Well, either way, synthesis is incredible, and I'm so excited to see what my kids do with it. But something else that's on the level of synthesis is obviously the parent teaching their children. The generational knowledge, all the different things. So my question to you, Chrisman, is what's something that you want your kids to learn and master outside of synthesis type environments?
Yeah, I think about this a lot too. There's a couple things. A recent one is we have like a redwood tree in our backyard, and I've been talking about like doing a tree house or something like that there, and we hadn't gotten around to it. I get busy with work and everything. So we just bought some climbing ropes and harnesses and just threw the rope up into the branches about a week ago, and sent them up there. Had the 10-year-old like hang some pulleys so the younger ones can climb up, and I can like belay them. So I think that kind of like how am I going to teach that on a computer? You can teach the kids about having agency or whatever, but I just think like dads going and doing doing things that get you in trouble with mom. It's like I think that's an important one. Um,
Adventure.
Yeah.
Adventure, yeah, exactly. Like, and exactly, right? Like again, like I can teach my kids fractions. Like I'm perfectly capable of doing that. But they would
At least
rather
one of us is.
they would rather learn it even if you're good at it. Like they don't want to learn it from you. I think if your kids don't want to learn it from you anyway. So just delegate that to the census tutor, treat that like your hired governess, and then you go do the fun stuff. Another one that has surprised me because I didn't think I was going to be this into it. Is I think like Americans actually really get it right with how into sports they are. I just think sports are like they're great. You get something that you don't get from school. It's probably on balance, more important than the academics. It builds confidence. You learn to lose, to control your emotions. Like just that simple thing of like your emotions are getting involved all the time in sports, and learning to control yourself is like essential to what it means to be a man. And I have obviously, like, I think education is incredibly important. But I think we get it right that we focus on sports a lot. I think obviously there are extremes. Um, but I think sports are great, and important. I think little boys, especially, even if you're not going to be the best at it, you need to build your physical capability. Like, it gives you confidence to take on the world, and even if your job has nothing to do with sports. So I'm probably maybe different than a lot of education entrepreneurs there. I view our jobs like freeing up the time for these other things, right? Like, if you can do the academic learning in an hour a day, and then you can go out and do, martial arts and sports and adventures, like, to me, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm jealous.
I totally
want
agree.
that for myself now.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. So you've had a lot of experience as a parent so far. Can you think of any advice that you wish you had when you first had your first child that you would love to give to a dad?
Gosh, man, I don't know how people, I don't know if people answer these questions. I feel like you become, you guys will know that you just become such a different person. You can't even imagine how you were thinking back then. And after 3 kids, yeah, I totally feel that way. And I think it's the cliche stuff everybody says, like, put your phone down and, go read to them at night, love their mom, and show affection for their mom. Um, yeah, it's a lot of the cliche stuff. Um, I think I'm actually curious to know how you guys think about this. I was, we've never like disciplined our kids at all, and not any conversation my wife and I had, but it seems like they don't need it. Even the boys are pretty rowdy, but if I would just, if I'm just disappointed in them or something when they were really little, it's like they would just like start sobbing and be so upset. I remember the most extreme kind of discipline thing I did was like I grabbed my 3-year-old by like the upper arm one time and was like, "Hey, no," because he just wasn't listening to me. Kids do, and he was just sobbing. But then he was like really happy like 5 minutes later because it was like, "Oh, somebody told me, who's in charge and like what the order is." So we never had to do any of the any of the discipline issues or anything like that. But I'm curious if that's a weird experience. My wife might just be a really good mom, and that's what happens. But I don't, it's not something we planned, but it's just been interesting to me because that was a big, my parents like hit us with a belt when we were kids, and I know a lot of people grew up the same way, and I don't know, yeah. I'm curious how you guys handle that though.
Yeah, so I grew up the same way, and coercion was kind of the coercion or authoritative parenting was very
Right.
prominent in my parents' household, specifically because my mom was there, without my dad 5 days out of the week, 'cause my dad was on the
Right.
road doing his work,
Yeah.
right? But when he'd come home, he'd
Yeah.
lay down the law, right? And I
Right.
said, I'm going to change that. So I read a lot of child psychology, like behavioral psychology books, and there's a lot of them. Like Gordon Neufeld has some great books on that. Gabor Mate, a lot of guys like that. But
I was
the
going to
the
ask if
resound,
anyone's read the keep your children. I forget what the title of it
yes,
is. Keep your
yes,
children.
I've
I forget what it is. Is that it?
yeah, hold on to your children, and it's
Yes,
an
yes, that's the
amazing
one.
book,
Yeah.
amazing book. But the over resounding thing that I've always seen is parents with good connections with their children never have issues with discipline because the connection is strong enough to keep the kid in check, to keep, and a lot of people mix this up. Okay. So discipling and punishing are two different things. When you're disciplining your children, you're discipling them. You're sitting down and saying, okay, honey, we don't do this. This is how we're supposed to act. This is what we do. You walk them
Right.
through it because they don't have that puzzle piece. Most
Yeah.
parents think discipline is, popping them, right? And,
Right.
get in line. They completely disregard that child is either in the basement level of their brain or they're just
Right.
not they're not seeing it, right? And so
Right.
discipling and punishing are two different things, and people need to stop punishing, repair their severed connections with their children, and then start
Yeah.
disciplining as in discipling. And
Mm-hmm.
I think you just do a really good job of discipling, and that's why you don't have to do a lot of the extreme stuff, because natural leaders don't have to force leadership.
Right. Yeah, it's like a look will do it. I think because it's what they want. Like they want to, if you're a good father, they
Yeah.
want to be like you, and or
Right.
they want to please you and your wife, and yeah, that's interesting. That's one thing that I've found fascinating is like we homeschool, and it's I'd read this book. And you guys read the Harvard grant study? There's a book called Triumphs of Experience about it. This is one book I think I would gift to like every prospective parent. They did this study at Harvard. Yeah, I think they started in the 40s, and they studied all the men at Harvard, and they're kind of looking at what breeds success. So it's a longitudinal study. It's been going on like 70 years now, and they were just looking for what breeds success in like all areas of life. So they just they followed up with these people every year, and watch them over decades. And the thing that they found was really fascinating. They looked at like what predicts military success, and they're like, was it going to be like a strong, upper body and muscles, or good looks or whatever? And they found the best correlation with success in military and school and anything was how warm your family relationships were. Just
Mm-hmm.
how warm your family. If you had like a warm, loving
Yep.
home, full of laughter, then you're
Yeah.
going to be successful at whatever. Like even going to war and presumably killing people. Even that just having like a warm, loving mom, especially, was critical. So it's kind of like if you want to be the tiger parent, and really push and like drive your kids, then the way to do it is with a lot of love and closeness. Not like the hard driving approach. So I always found that fascinating, and we tried to live by that.
Yeah, I'll chime in here. I've been a military commander, and so I have active duty experience. I had a break in service, and then I joined the National Guard. And in between that phase, I become a father. I'd done a lot of growing up too, in terms of like healing my past and trauma and stuff. And I like to say that I'm 100 times the officer I used to be because I have empathy and compassion in my leadership style now. Before, I was
Yeah.
very much the authoritarian, and it works in the military to a degree. I've actually disagreed with some people on that too, where I think even in the military, where the context of your job is to literally destroy the enemy on the field of battle, it's the least nice thing you can possibly do in human existence. There's still a place for love and compassion and empathy. And then when you extrapolate that to fatherhood, how often do you really need to be the authoritarian with your children? Most of their behaviors is not evil. They're testing their boundaries in the world. They're trying to find where they actually stack up in the pecking order of life, because there is a natural order to things. And so when they're testing us or whatever, or acting out a little bit, it's often just them finding that line. And I have a pretty funny example. Just the other day, my daughter kind of mouthed off to me a little bit. She's 9 now, and she did it like twice in a row. And so I kind of like had this moment of, I was looking at her with a pretty stern look, but she was kind of looking back at me, and I couldn't help but just start laughing because I was like, I can't believe you said that, And so then we laughed about it, and then I explained to her after laughing, like, honey, you can't talk to me like that. Like, would you talk to your teacher in that way? Probably not, right? So don't be disrespectful, And
Right.
I used to be the authoritarian, and now that I have a lot more compassion and empathy, like my daughter already knows my authority. I don't need to remind her of that thing.
Right.
Like she knows already, right? Through my presence, its influence. And so to the guys listening, like that's the thing to remember is you cultivate your influence, your presence, so that you have influence, and then you don't have to be the disciplinarian, the authoritarian, cracking the whip on people in your home. They're already kind of a little bit afraid of your authority, but then you wrap them with love and compassion and understanding, and now they actually want to please you. To your point, right, Chrisman, that's real leadership. And even in the military, right, that's trained in you heavily, is you have to earn the trust of your people. Well, how do you do that? It's not necessarily by being the toughest or the smartest or the fastest or whatever. It's by having that connection, to Brandon's point. And the more I learned how to do that better, the better a commander I became. And the better the unit morale was, the better the esprit de corps and all those kinds of things. So if it works in the military, how much more should we be doing it at home as
Yeah.
just regular guys?
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's a interesting story about your daughter there is the challenging, right? Is like that challenge comes, and I think, that's something maybe I did worse when I was younger, the kids were younger, is I'd respond to a challenge like more aggressively, whereas I think your approach is the right one. They're like you just you're like they're saying something really disrespectful and you just laugh it off. It's like a just a little test, and it's like the test
Yeah.
is just that you can just chill and not be affected, which is true. I think like everything with men in life, when you're in school and somebody's like making fun of you, the giving like a big reaction is not going to help. You just have to be able to shrug that off, and that's
Yeah.
I was worse at that when my first, my kids were
Yeah.
younger.
To be clear, I gave her a very stern
Yeah.
commander look first, and then she kind of met it right back. And we held it for like 10 seconds, and I couldn't help but just start laughing. I was like, "You little tiny girl, you got a little bit of tune to you."
Did
You
she
know,
get the knife hand, George?
I did not give her the knife hand. I
Knife
withheld the knife
hand.
hand. I
That's
did
right.
not.
Yeah.
I
Serious.
did not. No, because it wasn't needed. I think after we laughed, she realized she had crossed a line. I think that's why she was a little bit relieved too. Like, oh, you know what? I probably deserved something. And so that grace too, giving grace is powerful. Because to Brandon's
Yeah.
point earlier, you give them the chance to come back to be connected, and then you can explain like this is why this behavior is unacceptable. Obviously, if they're going to continue to be way out of line, we've got to start tightening the parameters a little bit. But again, it's not like beating him over the head. Dustin, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I could think every single time that I felt I really had to discipline my son intensely, it was because of my own ego and embarrassment. I'm at dinner
Yeah.
and he's climbing on the table, and I look over and I see some old lady judging me and going, "You're such a terrible father." And I think that she's more important than my son. So I yell at him and go, "Get off the table," right? And I realize, wow, that wasn't about him at all. That was about my, uncomfortable situation there. But it's funny. You gave me some great advice. I DM'd you last year and I said, "I'm so excited about synthesis. I have a 3-year-old. How do I get into it?" And you responded, "Wrestle with him, go outside, have fun, and go play with him." And so I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to go wrestle with my son. It's our favorite thing to do now. And not only is it a
Oh, that's
blast,
amazing.
it's so great. So thank you for that. And it releases more dopamine. I'm sure you've seen the study. When boys wrestle with their father, they get
I
more
saw that, yeah.
oxytocin and dopamine, than they do when they
I think
hug.
you sent that. I think you sent that to me. I think, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it's
funny, and they get more
fascinating.
from the mom wrestling with them doesn't do it. It's something about dad. Yeah, my
Yeah.
dad did that with me, and like we loved it. And then it's something we lived in San Francisco, and we'd have people over sometimes with the kids and like young families, and then me and the boys would start wrestling, and the other families would be like stunned, like they're on safari
Yeah.
in Africa, like
Yeah.
like just shocked, like
Look at these
what's going
animals.
on? But they would
Who are
love
these
it.
toxic
Oftentimes,
people?
Yeah.
no, I mean they would just be like, "This is amazing." Oftentimes, their kids would join in, and they would see
Right.
it, and they'd be like, "Well, this is great. Like, how do we do this?" I'm like, I don't know, just dad, just get down and
Be
wrestle with him.
goofy.
So
Yeah.
that's my standard thing to say, to people who ask me, like, how do I get prepared for synthesis now for like my unborn child? Lots of hugs and wrestling, toss him up in the air real high.
Yes.
It's
The boy
beautiful,
must grow to
right?
be a warrior.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's the
I
things
love
that
it.
are like the most rewarding are like they're not that stressful, and those are the things, the best things that you can do for your kids. It
Right.
turns out. So that's
I love that.
something beautiful about
So
that.
we talk about legacy a lot on this show. I think that's a big important element of being a good father is thinking about what your legacy needs to look like. I think that's misunderstood though, and I'm really interested to hear your answer to this because you have done a lot of things. You've founded companies. You've done a lot of great things. You seem to be an incredible father. You've got a great family. So, not many guys have done what you've done so far in life. And the way I train men is to think about it is like you need to understand what that long-term picture needs to look like so that you can navigate towards that, right? And then it influences the decisions you're making today. But when it comes to legacy, how do you think about what that means? Because I don't believe it's like having my name on a building. I really don't care if people remember my name. I care about like the impact I actually made. So I guess define in your words what you think legacy really is, and then what does your vision of the future look like? What's that long-term legacy you're building look like?
I don't know. I don't know if I thought much about that word specifically. I had was a goofy story, but I watched Dumb and Dumber with the boys the other day, and I mean maybe it was like 2 weeks ago now,
That's a rite of
and
passage right there.
yeah, I fast forward through some parts. They're like 10 and 8, so I just skipped a couple scenes. But they just love it, and we're like they quoting it back and forth to my wife's chagrin, all the time now. And one of them was said something like, I can't wait to watch this with my kids when I grow up. And I was like, ah, so like that's it, right? Like just, and I have the same thing. Like my dad, the stuff my dad wrestled with me, so I wrestle with them. So I hope they wrestle with their kids, and I just regard that as like that's the most important thing. Is like you're raising up. If your kids like they want to be fathers and like husbands, then I don't know. That's all I think about. I think about the company lasting, generations and that kind of thing. But mostly what I think about is that really makes me feel like I'm on the right path in life is like when my kids talk about having kids of their own. Because I think that's the hardest thing. There's all these guys that have
Yeah.
built really big businesses and then the family falls apart in a generation or two. So I don't want that. My kids thriving is what makes me happy. So I want them to have kids who
Yeah.
thrive and so on. So that seems to be the hardest thing. And yeah,
I like that, man.
worth
That's
the effort.
actually what I teach is
Oh yeah.
the number one legacy is the strength of the relationships you cultivate in your family,
Yeah.
period. And if
Yeah.
that is ever sacrificed to build something else, you got it wrong. And you need to check yourself. And look at all, to your point, look at all the successful athletes or actors or CEOs who've built these, great things. And it's like, and their families are disasters. In my
Yeah.
opinion, you're some of the biggest failures as a man that's ever walked the earth, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And I think we need to bring back like people used to get shunned if they got divorced and things like that, right? In a way, because it was a symbol that you failed your family. So like as a man, you should lose respect for that. And I think we need to be a little bit harsher in our, cultural standards on things like that, because maybe having the world's biggest GDP isn't really worth it.
Yeah.
So
I think
I
about the
appreciate your
GDP a
answer.
lot. I'm glad, I'm glad we have a higher GDP than Europe. And so, I think that's great. All the products we can buy is a nice thing.
Yes.
Um, but but yeah, I mean, it's that will, more women, like staying out of the workforce and raising families. There's a great C.S. Lewis quote that every job or every career exists to support the ultimate career, which is that of the homemaker. Right? Every other career is in service to that one, which is the one that matters. And I think that's right, but that would lower GDP, wouldn't it? Right? With fewer dollars, it's just my wife. She used to run a business. She was an entrepreneur, and she sold it, and she stays home with the kids, which is a big job, and it's just like it's priceless. There would be no amount of money that we could spend that would be a
Amen.
stand-in in any way. So it's like this ultimate form of wealth, and having a mom that can stay with you. My mom didn't do that; she wanted to work. I don't have like judgment for women who don't do that, but it's I think by and large, more close families is a better thing. And yeah, you're right. It's not captured in GDP, is it?
Well, clearly you're doing a great job and having a lot of fun experiences. So one of the things we love to ask the dads here, Chrisman, is what is just like one of the core memories that really stands out for you as you became a father?
Mm. Um, Man, there's a couple. I ha there's the thing that first jumps to mind is we had this moment with each of the kids now where and they're babies, they're kind of like offline in a sense, and then they kind of gradually like come online. You kind of see who they are. And I had this moment that I remember the first time with the oldest one. He was like 4, and we were at like an outdoor concert in San Francisco, and I was like holding him. I was laying on my back and holding him up above me, like him looking down at me. And I just looked into his eyes, and I was like, man, this kid's like he's okay. Like he's just I don't know, he has like that confidence and like love in his heart that just like kind of shines through, and I could just see it in that moment. And I remembered it being like, we did good. There's so much of the kids is like decided by like age 4, right? It's crazy. Like so much of that personality and the fundamentals are just kind of, you build them up, by the age of 4. And I just saw that like look in his eyes where I was like, oh, this one's okay. And then I saw that with his younger brother, a couple years later. I can remember the moment for like each of my kids where they looked at me and I was like, this is like a good person. You can tell when you look in someone's eyes, like this is a good person. I think if you're a good person, I always have this weird thing where I feel like I can see that in other people, but then other people like don't see it. And but I think you can like recognize when you look at somebody, kind of like what's in their heart, if you know what you're looking for. And so those kind of moments really stand out. Yeah, I mean those are if that's what you're asking about with like kids,
Oh yeah.
yeah, I have other core memories
those
from my
moments.
own life, but less interesting, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
the kids has
Those
been
moments
there's a
are just
before and
amazing.
after. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah.
Well, Chris, thank you so much. Where can people follow you? Where's the best place to like track you? And if they want to start using Synthesis, what's the best way to go about doing that?
Yeah, synthesis.com, or we have an iPad app. You just search for Synthesis on the iPad. And then I'm at Chrisman Frank on Twitter if you're into that whole thing. Twitter or X, you should say.
Twix. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we will certainly link everything in the description, but synthesis.com, go check it out. If you're a busy parent and want to give your kids better access to learning practically and faster, sounds like this is the answer. I'm definitely going to check it out for myself. Chrisman, any final thoughts for the audience before we close?
No. Thank you guys so much. It was great conversation. Great to meet you finally, Dustin, and George and Brandon as well.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it so much. Love what you're doing, and wish you all the success in the world so we can provide better outcomes for kids to truly learn instead of wasting time in school. So thank you so much, man, for sharing with us today. All right, dads, go check out Synthesis, and let's get climbing that mountain of fatherhood. We will see you in the next episode. You got the knife hand there. Thanks for watching this episode of the podcast. If you're on YouTube, drop a subscription to us, and if you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a review. It helps greatly. If you are also ready to level up as a man, check out Elite Sentinel Coaching, our program designed specifically for men, where we forge men into leaders. We turn cowards into kings, weaklings into warriors. Become the hero in your story. Join us today.